I struggled to get out of bed. Suicidal ideation was certainly part of my experience. It's just devastating, depressed, finding a reason to live. Even though I had support systems around me, I still felt incredibly isolated.
This week's conversation matters because it speaks not only to veterans but to anyone who's ever gone through a major life transition and wondered, who am I now? Michele Scherr, a certified health and wellbeing coach, stress and precision health specialist, and co-founder of Personalised Health and Wellbeing Solutions, has created a new military transition wellness program designed to support veterans as they move from service into civilian life.
The hardest step, isn't it, is to actually get out of your own way and reach out for help.
Michele understands transition from the inside out. She's lived the identity shift that comes when the structure, purpose, and community of military life fall away. And she's seen what happens when the noise of life becomes overwhelming, when stress lives not just in the mind, but in the body. In Australia, we have more than 500,000 veterans that have served in the ADF, but we speak far less about what comes after: the loss of identity, the search for purpose, the impact on mental health.
Aligning people with who they were designed to be, who they are, what purpose their body is telling us they have, that is so validating and it's almost freeing.
In this conversation, Michele shares her own journey and the lessons that shaped her mission, why early intervention matters, how listening to the body can prevent crisis, and how precision health helps people understand what they uniquely need to cope, heal, and rebuild.
Precision health is the way of the future, and that individual nuance of treating you as the individual you are, but also finding people that you trust and won't give you band-aids.
And while this episode centres on military transition, the truth is these lessons apply to all of us. If you or someone you love is navigating change, if you want to better understand how to support veterans and their families, or if you're searching for purpose beyond a chapter that's ended, this episode is certainly going to hit the mark. So let's step beyond the noise and into what it truly means to rebuild with purpose. Joining me this week to step outside the noise and help us dive into the topic of transition and, what some of those noises that are going through for people that are post-service and, transitioning back into life after, fighting for their country or protecting their country is my guest this week, Michele Scherr. Michele, welcome.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me. This is the second time around, so I really appreciate that you've brought me back.
No, and it's, when we were communicating and you were talking to me about all the things that you were doing, it was just something that I knew had to be shared. And, through this platform, if we can share, messages of all guests, but, the message that you're going to share and some of the insights and some of the information you're going to share today with those that really need to hear it right now. Maybe there might be some people that might not want to hear it right now, but they know where to look and dive into it when they feel called to it or feel like they're ready to lean into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And whilst we're talking about transitions from military experience today, it really, the topic that I'm talking about can be applied to many of life's transitions. So yes, while for your listeners, for people who tune into the podcast, just because we're talking about military doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to them or people in their lives as well.
Yeah, 100%. Because we all know people in the military, we all know people in like first responders or people that are going through different transitions in different industries, in different professions. And I think that's a really good point to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Michele, when you think about the noise of life, what does it mean to you?
Oh my gosh. What I really think about is what it was like growing up and how simple life was compared to today, where everything is going, it feels like everything is going so fast and just getting faster. And our ability to adapt and change and take on all of this stuff, with AI AI is well and truly here to stay. And how does that affect us? And all of these inputs, every day. I just wonder how much the noise of life is just so loud. And it makes me wonder, how do we continue how do we continue to keep up? Number one, keep up with everything that's going on. And number two, look after ourselves in the process, because our bodies were never designed to be on 24/7, 365. Our bodies were designed to be on for a period of time and then off for a period of time so we can rest and recuperate. But today's life, it's just so fast paced. And I think being able to take a step back and cut through that noise to know what's really important, that's that's the key, I think, to wellness, to health and to wellness.
Yeah. And I think when you're talking about health and you're talking about life, we're going through this fast pace. And I'm sure a lot of listeners will, kind of resonate and relate to this is that we all say, oh, I'm good. No, I'm good. Yep. Things going well. When, you know, yeah, okay, it's great. You're good until you're not.
Oh,
Like, and then you've got a
absolutely.
problem. So I know what we'll dive into a little bit today as well, and the work that you're doing, and,
Mm,
your passion for, the health and the wellness space that you're in, revolves a lot around, listening to those things in the body that may be whispering, right? And focusing on, early prevention, and really picking up things early rather
mm,
than getting to a crisis point and kind of going, what do I do now? And sadly, as we
mm,
know, in Australia, and around the world, there's so many people that get to that crisis point and, choose to obviously, uh, take their life, which is devastating. And sometimes, those so many of those things could have been prevented by, you know, getting help early, instilling in them hope in their journey and the hope that, people do recover from mental illness and people do recover from so many health complications. And that, that they're not alone as well. And you're going to share some things today, I'm sure, that people are going to go, oh, other people go through that? Really? Other people do that? And they're sitting there listening to this going, I thought this was just me.
yeah. And I do hope that, what I share today is helps people to take the next step, because that's my intention in sharing today, is to not for someone to listen and go, "Oh, wow, that's what Michelle's been through," and, not to listen and go, "Oh, wow, what a great story," or whatever, but to listen to it and go, "How does this apply to me? Is there a lesson here for me? And if there is a lesson here for me, what do I do? What's my next step? What's my next positive step?" Because you talk about, people making decisions that are permanent, the consequences are permanent, are when they're really at a point in their lives where it's not a great time to be making decisions. We know that making decisions that have huge consequences should not be made, when you're in extremes of emotion. So when you're really angry or you're really sad, you shouldn't make life-changing decisions at that point. You need to come back to normal, back to an even keel, and then evaluate, okay, what's the best course of action from here? So yeah, it's I'm what I hope to get out of today is that for your listeners, someone listens and they go, "Oh, okay, how does that apply to my life? Ah, see that's, I'm not the only one going through this. Now I know what step to take. I know what the next step is."
Yeah, and both you and I know through the challenges and the struggles and the mental health kind of
Mm,
complications that we've had over the years through our different journeys is that those listening as well, they may already feel overwhelmed, they may already feel frazzled, they already may feel lost.
mm,
And what I want to say to listeners, and I'm sure you do as well, is that don't listen to this and then feel more overwhelmed. Just as you say, think, what is that one step that I can take? And then once you
mm,
take that
mm.
step, then you can take another step when you're ready. It
That's
doesn't have
right.
to be rushed, but as long as you're kind of moving forward, as long as you're implementing one thing or focusing on one thing, then
Mm.
over time, that consistent change, that is consistent little steps, you'll be able to look back and go,
Yeah,
wow, imagine
they
where
certainly
that's
add
where I
up.
was, and
Yeah,
that's where I am now.
yeah, they certainly add up.
Yeah. So Michelle, let's go back to, and I think, for those that haven't listened to the first episode, when I interviewed you on Share podcast, I'd really like you to give a snapshot of, you know, what what brings you to the work that you do and what you're going to share today, and how that's kind of really molded or cultivated your, um, I suppose, vision on what needs to be in this space.
Yeah, sure. So I come from a background, I was a nurse, I'm now retired, which was a big thing to kind of give up, to release my registration after I've been on the nursing register since 1990. So it was a big step to let that go. So coming from a background of nursing, having served in the military for nearly 20 years, during my time in the military, I accumulated a number of injuries and illnesses, which essentially meant that I was no longer able to continue serving. That was huge for me because I felt like it wasn't a choice for me to leave, and I felt devastated so coming out the other side of my military career, I could no longer be a military officer. I could no longer be a nurse, as I was trained to do. And I trained, emergency nursing was my buzz, and I also did critical care nursing. And so when I deployed overseas, multiple deployments overseas, I that's the area that I would work in, and also primarily in aeromedical evacuations. So moving patients around an operational theatre, so a theatre of war, to outside so that they'd be collected by another team, or within the theatre of war to get them the care that they needed. So when I came out the end, and I felt like been making what feels like small but significant impact on people's lives. You're being a small part, but it makes such a big impact. You go from there to essentially the message I took on, whether it was intentional or not, the message that I took on was you're of no value. You can't do what you were trained to do. You have no worth. You've got nothing left to contribute. See you later, out the door. That's how it felt.
So Michelle,
So
talk to me about the feelings and emotions that you felt in those moments.
absolute devastation, Steve. Like
Mm.
I struggled to get out of bed. So I call it being in the hole. So I had fallen over the precipice. I was in the hole. Suicidal ideation was certainly part of my experience. Um, that feeling of having no worth, it's just devastating, depressed, um, finding a reason to live. So even though I had support systems around me, incredibly loving husband, my kids, family, everyone around me, but I still felt incredibly isolated. I felt, and in part that's kind of two way because I felt I had nothing to contribute, so I isolated myself. And others were trying to give me space so I could work through it, which was even more isolating, but it was kind of what I needed. And there's no kind of one answer. It's such a complex thing. Mental health is such a complex thing that finding the right support for each individual, and this kind of leads into my philosophy that puts someone in the right environment and they will thrive. So no matter what their situation, if they're in the right environment, they'll thrive. So let me use an example to illustrate the point. From a medical perspective, we look at stem cells, right? So we have stem cells, we put them in the right environment and they will become a muscle. We put them in this different environment and they'll become a bone. We put them in another environment, they'll become a kidney. So in the right environment, we will thrive to become and serve our purpose. Um, So finding that right environment is the key. So post discharge, it took me a very long time, and when I say very long time, I'm just over 8 years post discharge now, and it took me a good 7.5. Even now, I'm still working through, where is my value? How do I contribute? How can I have purpose? How can I be meaningful? People talk about legacy and that sort of thing, and I guess that's a similar kind of concept. I'm not sure how that sits with me, and it's different words, different horses for different courses. Um, but really, those feelings initially, I can't even begin to describe the devastation and the lack of drive that came with that devastation.
And I think for those listening, whether you're going through this or whether someone you love is going through this, I want to make this point is that, you were discharged, Michelle, 8 years ago, right? And you felt that isolation, you felt all those feelings and emotions, which listeners right now can be feeling all those emotions, not just from a military perspective, but from just a life perspective.
Mm.
And I think what I'm proud of you is that you're here doing work each and every day. You've found that purpose. You're working to help people. And I think that's a good reminder for those that are sitting in that real isolation stage. There's feelings and emotions that there is hope, as in you find what your purpose is, what your passion is, right? And that for you now is helping people, not just from the military and from the defense, but in life to improve their health and wellness. And that's your purpose. So you
Yeah.
came out feeling though you didn't have a purpose anymore, but you have found your purpose. And I know there'd be many people that you work with, and I know I am. I'm glad that you're still here and, you're having that purpose in the world. And I want listeners to know if they're going through something that they do have a purpose in this world, and that passion can be reignited, and they can redefine their identity past their role as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the key for me was learning about precision health, precision medicine, and that learning that my body was designed a particular way. I was designed a particular way that shapes the way I see the world, the way I process information, that my body works a particular way. And it's all there. The measure, like, when I develop a profile in my work, when I develop a profile of someone, we use measurements of the external body to look at ratios of how bones have developed, and to develop a picture of the health of that person in that moment. But it gives us so much more than just, here's your health. It gives us information about, what's the best environment to put yourself in to thrive. So it's not only what you put in your body, so food and that sort of thing, and exercise. It's about your external environment. Like, if you're someone who needs a lot of solitude, and for years you've been told, what's the matter with you? And all of a sudden you're kind of gone, well, my body was designed so that I actually need solitude. I need time away so that I can think. I'm actually going to put some boundaries in around that. And I'm going to start doing that. And all of a sudden I feel like this lightness, because I've had that time to re-energize and to fill my cup. And all of these things that we talk about in terms of self-care, the hint or the code is already in your body, what works for you. So for some people, the float tanks, I know that, it's been a big thing about float tanks. For some people, you put them in a float tank, oh my gosh, they're going to crawl. They're going to climb the walls because they need sensory input. Whereas for other people, it's like, oh, this is how I recharge. Um, all of that code is already in your body. We already know what's going to make you thrive, and what's going to stress you, from the way your body has grown, and what influences, what hormones and all of that sort of thing have influenced your body. it's absolutely incredible what we can tell just by, developing a profile.
Yeah, wow. I look forward to, yeah, we're going to dive into more of that. But what we know right now, Michelle, is that, around 600,000 people in Australia alone are going through this transition. Veterans are going through this transition. And then if we add on everyone else that are going through different transitions, there's a large population in Australia that are going through these career and identity shifts, career transitions. And it can actually be, it's probably one of the biggest life shifts that people really struggle with. So talk to me about, what you know about transition and what some of the insights that you've unlocked or are helping people to unlock in that.
So, you may remember, or not. It may not be in your awareness. There was a Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicides, which
Yes.
concluded a little while ago, and a number of the recommendations came out, and they found that for veterans who are transitioning, and in particular the subgroup that aren't necessarily choosing to transition, for some people, they're choosing to discharge, and they've got sights on where they want to go outside the military. For others, it's kind of, I don't know who I'm going to be if I take this uniform off. And
Mm.
that the Royal Commission identified really succinctly that identity and purpose are two of the biggest things that people struggle with during a transition. And I know myself that it's taken me a long time, like years and years, to get to where I am, as I said, but I also know it can be shortcut. I know that there's a shortcut there. So, in terms of transition, so the Royal Commission identified that identity and purpose is such a key element to transition, and that's where people tend to trip up in their mental health journey is around identity and purpose. What I've noticed with the clients I work through, helping them to understand their identity gives them a confidence. And a lot of my clients say to me they feel really validated because for so long they've wanted to behave in XYZ, but they felt it wasn't socially acceptable. And let me put some brackets around that. I'm not talking about socially unacceptable behaviors, but I'm talking more in things like, um, some people need to eat 5 times a day, whereas others, intermittent fasting works. And I have a particular client who, she's absolutely gorgeous in, she'll put a hand up and, "Yeah, I wanna try something," "Yes, I'm gonna try it." And she went away with a group who, were doing intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting is so wrong for her body because she needs constant fuel because she's so active. It had mental health consequences for her. So in identifying that for your body, this is what you need,
Mm.
5 to 6 small meals a day, blah, blah, blah. She was able to go, no, this is what's right for me. To give you another example, someone who, so in the military, it's very common to get up early, to exercise first thing of the morning, then you get into your day, and you're really focused and going all day, every day, constantly active, constantly achieving. For someone who tends to be a night owl, to get them up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get them exercising stresses their body to a point where it doesn't matter what food they eat or what exercise they do, they will retain weight, they will put on weight, and they will carry weight because it's called chronobiology. Chrono meaning time and biology meaning your body. Um, it throws their chronobiology out. And so their body doesn't know how to function properly and it goes into coping. So when we move their chronobiology to match, we put them in alignment with how they're designed, all of a sudden that stress starts to lift. They start to release weight. They start to function so much better because they're in alignment with how they were designed.
Yep.
So you can go down, a bit of woo-woo if you like, but this is all actually evidence-based. And, the database behind all of this evidence is quite robust. So I'm finding that aligning people with who they were designed to be and looking at those, looking at the keys of who they are, who they were designed to be, what purpose their body is telling us they have, that is so validating and it's almost freeing because they can go from, oh, I have to get up at 5 o'clock and I have to move to, I'm going to have an easy morning. Oh, wow, I can cope with things so much better. I feel calmer. My mental health is better. I feel I can take on more during the day. I can cope more with whatever family dynamics is happening for them, whatever happens to be happening in their life by restructuring and then I guess reawakening their identity and realigning with their identity and purpose, it gives a sense of freedom.
Hmm. Why do you think, we've spoken about this in your previous episode, and I've also interviewed a couple of veterans as well. Why do you think, there's so much effort and so much investment put into people transitioning into the defense or military,
Mm,
but then there's this huge gap afterwards? Like, this is not brain science. Like, like it's not
yeah,
rocket science. These things are happening. Why is there such this gap that, it's great for you that, there's opportunity to help, people going through these career transitions, but especially from a military and defense perspective, why isn't this gap being looked after?
yeah. I'm going to take a 36,000-foot view of this.
Yeah.
So, and this is my opinion. This is not this is not defensive opinion or anything like that. This is my opinion. So when someone is coming, the reason that defense exists is to protect our country. Okay. So I think we all understand that. So when
Okay.
someone is entering defense, they need to be taught how to defend our country. So what their part is to defend our country. That's defense's reason for being. That's why it exists. Defense doesn't exist to help people transition to civilian life because their business is in very very obvious terms, their business is warfighting. So the effort is towards warfighting. Coming out the other end, that's not their business. Their business is warfighting. So that's, for me, from a 36,000-foot view, that's why there isn't a lot of emphasis. However, there's more and more social pressure that, hold on a minute, you take our people, you teach them warfighting, now you need to teach them how to be civilian again. So there's
Hmm.
more and more pressure, social pressure happening there. But it doesn't change the fact that defence's reason for being is warfighting and protecting our country.
And
So,
your view there is on many elements of society as well, right? So, we all work, we all pay our taxes. Once we reach a retirement age, there's a lot of the older generations get forgotten because they're not paying taxes anymore, right?
mhm,
The their whole thing is the government looks after the people that are paying taxes, so our aged care is also now, and I've got people that I speak to and friends in the mental health and
mm,
also federal health and state health. The
mm,
aged care is going through some of these real challenges as well, and very similar identity, ego, all these different things, these shifts, not just career shifts, life shifts, in from retirement, not feeling that purpose or that passion. And you can take that into, I know recently there's been some stories around people in the QPS here in Queensland, that, I think, is it when you reach 60, you have to retire, or there's a certain age you have to retire.
yeah,
It's not,
compulsory
it's not a
retirement.
choice,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
these changes, and then you reach a point where, there's so much lack of support in the older generations as well, similar to what we're talking about here. And there's so
Yeah,
many services and people such as yourself, Michelle, that are going, hang on, they're trying to plug a gap, but they're not getting the overall support and being able to, I suppose, raise more awareness and actually get the right support
yep,
because they don't have the funding to actually do and the support, right? Because a lot of it would be like, oh no, oh, we know this needs to happen, but we're not going to support them, because then if we support them, then we actually have to accept some responsibility and accountability for what we've caused in the first place.
And I'd also like to add another perspective in there,
Yep.
again from the 36,000-foot view of how do we, those taxpayer dollars, how do we benefit the most people with those taxpayer dollars? So if you've got, if you've got 5 people here or 10 people there, or, maybe it's 100 people who are affected, I'm sorry, and this is again not something that I particularly agree with, but potentially it's a balancing act of how do we care for the most number of people. And so you're right, when one of the big, I guess, the big train smashes where we're headed towards as a society here in Australia is what happens with our aging population.
Mm.
And you're exactly right. So there's compulsory retirement age for many of the first responders. There's certainly compulsory retirement age for the military. And where's their purpose? When you've been in such a service-based industry for so much of your life, where you're giving, 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 how do you then step away and go, huh, I'm not doing that anymore. Does my life have meaning?
Mm.
It's quite a conundrum. It is quite a
Yeah.
conundrum.
And there's many layers of this as well, going through the health system recently, and chatting to some people, you know, like I get in to have an operation quite quickly. But if I was in an older generation, I would be probably pushed back weeks or months in some cases. And I was chatting to a lady, a nurse who's been a nurse, and she was a midwife for, she's probably been 4 or 5 decades now. And we were just talking about the aged care sector and how, these people that have worked decades and decades and decades for their, for life and for their country, and they paid taxes and everything like that. And then when they get sick or they need an operation, sometimes they they can't get in to get the operation, and if you're
Yeah.
younger, you're actually prioritized. So, we could just do like a 12-hour episode just on that. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're
Yeah.
talking about this gap that exists.
Mm.
And I know you've got a beta program that you're working on, and I'd love to, I've heard some about it. I want you to share more with listeners, so that it can either help them if they're going through it, or it might be something that someone they know or love, might be interested in it as well.
Yeah. So this program, thanks, Steve. This program has come from the identification that the first 12 months post service is really the danger period for mental health deterioration. So the idea is that the services I provide are kind of like a foundation. If you think, I think of it as if you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, this is the table, or this is the piece of wood, or whatever you're resting the jigsaw puzzle pieces on. What I find with the veteran and the ex-serving organisation community, there are so many people who want to help. So many people who want to help. And it might be, and I'm just going to pluck a few examples here. It might be a weekend of surfing, or a weekend of, or a week of camping, or it might be an online course, or it might be riding horses for a weekend, or, there are so many different ways of helping. And I see those as the jigsaw pieces. So for someone who is challenged when it comes to their identity and their purpose and essentially their ego, um, these are all pieces of putting it together. I can go and I can learn this little bit about myself. Or I can learn this little bit about myself, doing all of these different programs. What I offer is actually the foundation underneath it of knowing who you are, which helps you to direct what you're open to. So I'm not saying that, any of these programs are bad for anyone, or, what I'm saying is different people will thrive in different areas. So for someone, the the program I offer kind of gives them a head start on knowing what's going to benefit them the most. And that's where I think the value is of taking a step back and going, who am I? Who am I designed to be? I've been putting on all of these personas, my military persona, my daughter, my son, all of these roles that I've developed a mask or a persona. What's actually me? Because you're all of those things, but what is acting and what is adaptation to a particular situation and what is real. And that's what my
Mm,
program helps to identify. So by looking at what's best for you to get the best sleep, what's best nutritionally to put in your body and how many times a day and what time of day to eat and how to move and what's the best time of day to move to get best gains and I look at all of the lifestyle stuff, socially, environmentally. I look at all of those things to say, for you to thrive, this is the best. Now let's look at what's actually happening for you and see how we merge from what's happening for you with what's the best for you. And let's see where the middle ground is. Because it might be you can totally adapt for everything that's best for you. Or it could be that your life circumstances, so say for instance, someone with a spouse and children, having an easy morning isn't going to work for them, or exercising of an afternoon isn't going to work for them. They have to do it of a morning, and it's like, okay, absolutely, you can do that. Let's look at how you modify it so that you don't cause that slump at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Or let's see how you modify it so that we get the best out of the rest of the day. We don't compromise and you get consistent energy. You don't have the peaks and troughs of emotional energy. How do we do that so that you can get the best out of your life, circumstances as you want to live your life? Does that make
mm.
sense?
And yeah, 100%. And I think one of the things that I would share as well, and I know you believe in this as well, is that whatever challenge or whatever mental health or health challenge that you're going through, and for listeners that are listening to this, um, it's not just one thing or one person or one specialist that's going to help you, right? And your beta program is not, you know, there to be the be all and end all of it, right? But it's a part that is being missed by some of these other specialists. But I think to get back to being your best, and I know for me, going through a mental health journey, now experiencing some physical stuff, it's about having a team that works together with all their specialties to,
Yes,
mentioned like puzzle pieces earlier, like it's about putting those puzzle pieces back together, and you need all the different people to actually be able to get you back to being the best that you can be.
absolutely. And one of the things I find is that by having that foundation underneath all the jigsaw puzzle pieces, it puts you in a better position to be responsive to those puzzle pieces. So for someone on a mental health journey, it allows you to center yourself, to not be heightened, to bring that alertness down so that you're more receptive to the interventions. And it means that you heal quicker. So when you're able to go, this is what I know, these are the boundaries that I'm putting in. Um, it allows you that respect of yourself, that coming home to this is how I'm designed, this is how I'm going to thrive, allows you to be responsive to other interventions. So you're absolutely right in talking about essentially, I call them silos because whilst there might be correspondence exchanged, it's down like the coordination can be one of the most challenging things. I know veterans face, and I assume that it's the same for pretty much everybody else experiencing healthcare and all of the, like I say, all of the people that are trying to help. It can be so disconnected. Having a framework that kind of joins it all together, I think would, and that's what I'm aiming to do, is be that framework that pulls it all together so that people have a consistent experience. They have a foundation that they know that they can draw upon to get the best out of um, their healing journey.
Yeah. So looking at the program, talk to me about, let's take it on a bit of a journey. What's that person feeling like, or what they're going through when they start? And what are they going to discover? And what's your hope for the outcome at the end of the program?
Yeah, so initially coming into it, I think there's a bit of curiosity, and I know that with a number of my clients, they kind of they look at me really like they're a bit confused because they're how can you know so much about my life? You've only just met me. How can you know so much about how I operate because you've only just met me? The cues are already in your body. Um, so
Is there resistance in that stage as well?
some more, some people have more than others, and that is also predictable
Yep.
by their body. Also tells me who's going to be more resistant than others, and
Yep.
that's okay. That's absolutely okay because um, anyone who's done any kind of professional or personal development knows of, it might be Myers-Briggs or it could be DISC or anything like that. You know that you communicate differently with different people. And that's
Yep.
exactly what I do. Their body tells me that they need a lot of evidence. So I'm going to have all the studies ready for them. For other people, it's about trust. And, they need to know that I'm trustworthy. So they need to be able to research me and all of that sort of thing. For other people, it's about connecting. Have they connected? And so I take the time to make sure I'm connecting with them and asking about them and their families and what's important to them. So it's knowing those how people connect or how their brains will switch on. So yeah, we do different things. So some people come, or majority come with curiosity, and that curiosity can look different for different people. As we move through, there's those aha moments of, oh, that's why I've always wanted to, or I've felt like, or why I've always behaved this way or resisted this particular behavior or action. They start that there's that understanding in the personalization. And then we move into the sustainability of how do you insert this into your life? And honestly, m- most of for those who are open, the steps we take in terms of sustainability are incredibly easy because they feel good. It
Mm.
feels aligned and, oh, this is what I've always wanted to do. This is how I've always wanted to run my day, for example. Um, for those who are a little bit more skeptical or more resistant, it can take some time. If they're open to it, great. If they're not, that's okay. But yeah, generally starting with curiosity, moving through that aha, so discovery, alignment, and then sustainability. That's the progress that we move through. And for most people, it is sustainable because it's easy. I'm not asking them to clean out their pantry and I only want you to eat, this particular way. It's it's amazing to me how many people have actually naturally migrated to foods that are good for them. They like foods that are good for them. So it might be vegetables. Yeah, I love veggies. Whereas other people like, oh no, I really love my meat. I love my proteins. And it's like, yeah, there's a reason for that because that's what your body craves. So I'm not going to take someone who really craves protein and say you have to eat all vegetables. You got to go totally vegan. There's no
Wow.
way I'd do that because it's too hard for them to sustain. So that final piece when they're moving out of the program really is about sustainability.
Yeah, brilliant. And from your experience, as a serving member, but also from the work that you do, what are some of the differences from a male and female perspective that come through this?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So what we know is, to go back to the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicides, what we know is that defence members, both genders, suicide at a rate much higher than our community counterparts, our civilian counterparts. For females, I think it's 5 times more prevalent. Um, but having said that, it's not in huge numbers. So whilst it is, all evened out, it's not. There are not a lot of females veterans who are suicide. So differences with males and females, a lot of it comes back to societal expectations. So defense tends to attract people with particular belief systems, and that's male and female. And then you put them out the other side, those belief systems, those underlying things that they value, that they hold most dearly, are still there. But when it's been a transition, not of their own initiation, so a medical transition, or they've essentially been told you're no longer required, don't come Monday. um, they It really does question what value we have, and that is different for males as opposed to females, because females are traditionally, even now, females are traditionally the nurturers, whereas males are traditionally the breadwinners. And so there's really a difference there. Whilst it's still purpose and identity, there's still a difference there in the type of purpose, the nuances between what's happening for a male versus what's happening for a female. For those, like I say, male military tends to be quite macho. And so that providing for the family, protecting the family, and now I might be ill, I might be injured, so I might have some mental health challenges. I might be injured and I can't provide for my family. I can't protect my family. So there are some pretty big challenges there. For the female, it could also be I can't provide for my family or protect my family, but it's a different nuance. So if we talk about one of the examples I use quite commonly, the expectation for females, if you love someone, you will sacrifice everything for them. And that registers as, I will always put everyone first. I will, I can't spend money on myself. And so many times I hear women say, oh, look, I feel so guilty for spending money on myself. I feel so guilty for having time out. Females, love equals sacrifice. And that's what we've been taught through the ages. This is a generational thing that's been passed on. It's changing now, but it's still there. And I think this is why so many women in particular have an issue, and not to say it's not men, because it is men as well, but largely for females, it's so hard to put themselves first, to care for themselves so that they can care for the rest of their family. For males, love equals provision. I need to provide, so I need to provide. So that's provide safety and provide resources. So again, it's starting to change between the two genders, and I see that as the next generations are coming through, which I think has a lot of positive to it. But I also think, oh, I wonder what they're going to see as their complication. But yeah, to get back to your question, yeah, definitely there are differences between the male experience and the female experience. And if you look at a lot of media at the moment, there's a lot coming out about the female experience within defence and some of the issues and challenges that females face within the defence environment, which are not necessarily incredibly supportive. I'd actually say they're quite destructive. Those experiences are quite destructive, but they're the things that women have been facing, and then they come out and they're used to fighting in, and I'm going to use generalizations here. They're used to fighting and putting themselves forward and all of that sort of thing, and then all of a sudden they've been told they're not good enough. Well, they've received a message: you're not good enough. You don't have any worth. You're of no value. But I'm so used to fighting, so their body keeps fighting because that's the pattern they've gotten into. Um, and same for men, but it's just nuanced differently because it's a different social expectation.
Yeah. So, looking at some practical things, if we're
Mm.
talking from a veteran perspective or people that are going through these kind of transition time, what are kind of three, kind of foundational practices that you would recommend that they could put in place in their life to help them through this stage?
Yeah. So it varies for everyone. So I'm going to give some themes, because as I say, everyone is totally different, and we hear that all the time. But the medical system, health system, wellness system will tend to treat everyone the same. But with what I do, you actually are different. So we look at themes. high level, we look at themes. So the first thing is give yourself grace. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to take some time out. And that's what, essentially, that's what the system is trying to help veterans do, is allow them the time out. But veterans put so much pressure on themselves to, I've got to get up. I've got to keep moving. I've got to do. Whereas the
Because they're so
system,
used to structure.
they are, absolutely. Um, and that's one of the things that people really struggle with coming out. So, first thing, giving yourself grace, allowing your
Mm.
body to come down from that hyper aware, hyper alert kind of level. The second thing is learning what works for you. Um, so, firstly, grace. Secondly, what works for you to help settle. So, whether it's breathing exercises, whether it's journaling, whether it's actually getting out and going for a hard run, learn what works for you to help bring your energy, to ground you, to bring your energy down. And the third thing is community, absolutely community. And I've been to a number of forums recently, and there are a lot of people talking about sporting organisations. Join sporting organisations, get in the community. That's not right for everybody. It is right for some people, but it's not right for everybody. Community is incredibly important, but for some people, having one or two in their community is enough, because otherwise it's too overwhelming. Whereas for other people, they need lots and lots of different faces in their community so that they can connect.
Mm.
So community, yeah, those three things. Give yourself grace, find what works for you, and cultivate your community.
Yeah. And if you look at, you mentioned sporting organizations there as well. We see this with high performance, athletes where they, from a very young age, they've been playing AFL or they've been playing football or whatever it is, right? And
Mhm.
then they get to the end of their career in their mid to late 30s
Mm.
and they go through all these transitions and these identity shifts and just all
Yeah.
these emotions and feelings because they had this community, they had this human connection, they felt part of something similar to the defense. And
Mhm.
then they come back and then they're so used to getting up at a certain time, going for a run, hitting the gym, doing training, all these
Mhm.
things. And then they're into a point where they're like, I don't have this structure, and then we see so many mental health changes usually in kind of that midlife, and we talk about midlife crisis, but in this midlife when things are already making us feel a little bit different and
Mhm.
that transition through life can be quite complicated.
Mm.
So, there's so many factors that what you're talking about, and it really highlights it's not just defense, it's not just the military, it is across our society. And I think, those
Absolutely.
tips that you've given, though,
Yeah.
those tips that you've given there are tips that anyone can utilize, all of us can utilize, even if we're not going through a transition. Like they're just three foundational elements, I think, that are so critical for life.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right, because any transition, and, I love that you've pointed out sports, and we've talked about transition to retirement, and we've talked about all of the different transitions into different periods of your life. So it could be, transitioning from having kids at home to the kids having left and being independent. That's a transition as well, where you kind of, your identity changes. Our
Yeah, a
identities,
relationship breakdown,
exactly. Our
same thing.
identities are
Yep.
are consistently evolving and changing, and allowing yourself grief instead of shoulding yourself. Um, and I think allowing yourself time to adjust, but being intentional about that, rather than, as you said earlier, life happens for me. What is this teaching me? What is this opening up for me? If you can get to that frame and start asking those sort of questions, life changes. Your outlook changes. What is this teaching me? What can I learn from this? How do I grow out of this, rather than
Mm.
staying stuck? And I think um, my experience of transitioning out of the military was, it's very much people doing their best, but it keeps you stuck. It keeps you stuck in that role. So, yeah, I think those three things of grace, learn what works, and community that's right for you, learning those things can help you navigate that transition to becoming who you want to be. And I mean, for some people, they do get stuck and they
Mm.
do stay there and they become very unhappy. They forget what joy feels like. And I have to say, it took me a long time. I'm talking years to really feel joy again, to start feeling again.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there are some people who will stay stuck, if you will, longer than others. Some people will transition really quickly. Others will transition more slowly. But it really, and that depends on life experiences and so many other things. But you're so right. This applies through so many areas of our society. So
Mm.
many.
So, for those listening that may not be going through a transition themselves, but they have a partner, they've got a
Mm.
family member, they've got a friend that's going through, what are some helpful ways that they can best support the person that's going through this transition?
One of the key things, and my husband taught me this fairly early in our relationship, is don't take it personally. We think that other people do, and particularly when they're close to us, we think they should just know that that irritates me, or they should just know, XYZ insert here. But they don't necessarily know that, or they're not in a space where that's at the forefront of their mind. So communication and checking in, you know, I see you doing this, and this comes back very much back to even conflict resolution. Of I see this happening. This is how I understand it to be. Is that right? Am I right in this? For those who are supporting someone through a transition, it's hard. It is hard. There is no doubt about it. Transitioning, in this case, transitioning from defense is really difficult. One of the things that families learn fairly early on is they have their life and the defense member kind of plugs in and plugs out. They deploy, they go on exercise, they go on courses, all of that sort of thing. So the family unit has their life. Then all of a sudden, this person is discharged. They're now in the family unit, and the family unit's going, well, this is the way we do it. This is the way we continue. And the family member's going, well, I don't want to do it that way. So it really is a lot about open communication and not taking it personally. Checking in on intent. You you spoke to me in this way. What was your intent? Are you having a bad day, or, are you upset with me? Checking in. What is it that that person's going through? Reassuring them, we love you. We want to be in your life. I'd like to work through this so that we can, both come out of this. We can preserve our relationship. Can we have a discussion about it? I'm very much about dialoguing, not debating or arguing. I'm very much about dialoguing, which means this is what I'm hearing. This is how I understand it. Was that your intent? Are you able
Mm.
to phrase it a different way because I don't understand it? I'm not receiving it in that way. It takes a lot of effort. And believe you me, when emotions are heightened, it takes a lot of effort to be able to speak with respect and with civility. But if the relationship is important to you, keep trying to find that way. And there is no getting around. It's hard. One of the most difficult things you can do, I think, is to support someone who's coming through a transition where they feel their identity has been stripped from them and they don't know who they are.
Yeah. And I think one of the, there's many important elements of it, but I think one of the most important element of having a conversation and having a discussion and sharing this out there, Michelle, is that, um, we talk about signs and symptoms, right? So people listening to this that are caring for someone that's going through this transition or, kind of living with someone that's going through a life transition, whether it's military or otherwise, they'd be picking up on a lot of signs.
Mhm.
And then you've shared your journey and shared what some people that you've worked through are going through that feelings and emotions. And
Um,
we do this in mental health first aid where we go, okay, what are the signs? what can you see? You know, the person's disheveled, they're
Mhm.
tired, they're
Mhm.
withdrawn, all these different things. And
Mm.
then we kind of look at what are the symptoms, you know, what are they feeling, you know?
Mm.
And then that gives you a deeper empathy and an understanding, which allows when you have that approach and where you have that conversation that you actually go in it with a little bit more empathy and you understand if I was going through that and I was feeling like that, I probably would get defensive. I probably would be snappy. I probably would feel all these things if I was feeling worthless, if I was feeling alone, if I was feeling isolated.
Mm.
And then the other element I'd touch on as well, which I deliver in the course, is, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is really kind of when you're dialoguing and you're communicating with someone, um, it's all about I statements, not the, you know, you statements, but it's also about separating the behavior from the person,
Yes.
right? So so that they don't feel like they're under attack. It's about these are the things that you know, are making me feel a certain way,
Mm.
you know, and really digging into that rather than saying you this, you that, you make me feel like this. It's the behavior, it's not the person. Because if you're caring for someone, whether it's a partner or a family member or a friend that's going through this transition, you love them as a person, right? You may not love the behaviors that they're exhibiting, but those behaviors that they're exhibiting in many of these cases weren't there at the start, right? Life changes, life events have happened, trauma, those kind of things, which has
Yeah.
put them into this now. So it's about focusing on going, okay, you want to care and love for the person. That's great. Don't let their behaviors kind of affect that, you know, and make sure that they know that it's the behaviors that you're upset with, not them as a personal.
And I think this is probably a really important point to add in, Steve, is that bad behavior is bad behavior and that's not acceptable. So, punching walls, hitting people, destructive behaviors are not acceptable. How can we deal with this so that you get the energy out, but we're not destroying things? Or alternatively, go to one of those the businesses that allow you to take a sledgehammer to a car and and get that energy out. But it's not okay to be abusive. It's not okay to be physically or mentally abusive. And how can you be supported to get your be understood, get your frustration out without the destructive side of things?
Yeah. And that comes back to environment, you know,
Yeah,
stepping into
absolutely.
environment. So, you know, what we know is from a male perspective is that substance use disorder is very prevalent
Mm,
in men because they
yes,
use it as a coping mechanism, right?
yes.
And I always talk about shift the coping mechanism. So we all have coping mechanisms, all of us, right? You and
We do.
I, you know, we met in a runners group, right?
Mm,
Guess what? That was a coping mechanism,
exactly.
right? Right? So
Absolutely.
all coping mechanisms aren't bad, right? So, you know, for someone that's listening to this that may be drinking or have an awareness that they're drinking or they're taking some level of substance or they're doing something that is negatively impacting not just their health, but their relationships in
Mm,
their, you know, in their life. It might be affecting their career or their job, their livelihood. You know, it's really about what are the environments you have to switch to shift to step into, where you
correct.
actually may be surrounding yourself with a better community that is actually going to support you on this growth journey rather than keep you stuck, as you said earlier in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, and that comes back to put an individual in the right environment for them, and they will thrive.
Yep.
Put them in the wrong environment, it's gonna become destructive one way or another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, out of today's conversation, which has just shared so many great insights, and I think there'd be people listening to this going, wow, I've got so much out of it. But if there was just one message you wanted to deliver, what would that be?
That's a really good question, because I'm kind of coming from precision health is the way of the future. And that
Mhm.
individual nuance of treating you as the individual you are. So yes, you've got a lot of commonality. You're a person, so you have a body, and this person has a body, and all of this. but we all operate differently. So precision medicine and precision health, the way of the future, but also finding people that you trust and
Yeah.
won't give you band-aids. It's one of the biggest
Mhm.
frustrations I have when I'm talking to people. Some people are looking for band-aids, and I'm just, oh, it could be so much better. But finding people you trust to take you forward, and that may mean letting go of what you know, and that can be really scary. But finding people that you can trust to take you forward. So yeah, I'm not really sure. Is there one message? I don't know that there's
There probably isn't, but I thought I'd ask you,
yeah,
right? I know
all of this
there's so
one.
many things throughout this conversation. I
Yeah.
suppose, my passion for mental health, my passion for health and the space that you kind of play in as well and operate in, for me, I hope this conversation for people listening, not only if they're going through a transition or are going to go through a transition, because we all go through transitions through life,
Yeah.
or whether they're looking after someone, is it's to remind themselves that, you know, these challenges and these life changes and transitions are common. The feelings and emotions that you're going through right now, or you will go through in some of these transitions, are common.
Mm.
And that, there is support, there are services out there, and you are never alone. As much as you may feel like you are in that, when I've been in the depression and anxiety at all
Mm.
different times, we can feel really alone. But
Mm.
you've got to remind yourself, and I hope these conversations that people tune into, and
Mm.
reach out to you for your support and services, and whoever they're reaching out to, the people they're trusting, know that they aren't alone and that there's
Yeah.
always help and support available.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the hardest step, isn't it? Is to actually get out of your own way and reach out for help.
Yep.
That
But
can be the hardest.
it's so empowering once you learn that you can put your hand up and say, "Hey, I need help."
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and it's interesting because if you take it from a military, veteran perspective, those that are in the defense, if they need help, what do they do?
And that's a very good question. In my time in defense, you don't identify yourself. I
No, no,
was
no. But from an operational perspective, if you needed help on the battle lines or whatever it is, as in, there was an enemy coming, what would you do? Call it in and get
That's
backup.
right, you call in support, right? You call in
Yep,
support. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
yep.
absolutely.
But post, during and post,
Yeah.
kind of service, it's harder to do.
It is. Isn't that interesting, the dichotomy there of when you're actually doing your job, you're putting up your hand and calling in support. When it's something personal, it's really hard to reach out.
Yeah, and I was talking to I was interviewing a mate the other day, and we were talking
Yeah.
about why men a lot of the time don't, reach out and ask for help. And
Yeah.
I said, if you went and bought a brand new TV and you had to get it out of the back of your ute, what would you do? You'd pick up the phone and you say, "Hey Mick, can you come round and
Yeah.
help me?" And we'll install it on the wall, right?
Yeah.
But then when you go through a mental challenge and you're not feeling great, you don't ask for help.
Yeah, I that's just kind of lit something up for me of I didn't yeah, I hadn't connected that because you're so right. And I do know, like, I have a friend who is struggling at the moment, and there are so many people that she's kind of gone, no, I'm actually gonna be really honest. When people say, "How are you?" She's going to reply, "I'm struggling," or "I'm doing great," or "I'm not doing
Yeah,
so great at the moment." And the number of people that have just gone, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Boom, straight in with what they want. And these are people who are also trained in, you know, the "Are you okay" day type stuff of,
yeah,
and suicide awareness and all of those sort of thing, that training, and yet they're still being dismissive. But guaranteed in her work, if she put up her hand and said, I need some support to do this, with my work, yeah, there'd be people around to help. Wow. Wow. That's just gone kaboom.
yeah.
Thank you.
I love analogies and
Mm,
working on that, because it just helps us understand how sometimes we see something in a certain way and then we see something else and we act in a different way, or we
yeah.
perceive it as different. but it's all health, or it can be very
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah.
So all
Yeah.
good.
Context and
Awesome.
expectation.
Yeah, 100%. Well,
Yeah.
Michelle, I am so grateful for you for joining me for this week's episode. And it's been great to share your insights. And, for those that are listening in and going, I want to know more about the beta program, want to reach out to you for your insights and kind of, your knowledge and experience, what's the best way for people to do that?
So I'm on all the socials, and
Yep.
my business name.
Even TikTok?
No, I'm not on TikTok. I have to say I'm not on TikTok. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. I'm on YouTube. Michelle with one L, Michele, Scherr, Scherr. And the
Yeah.
business name is Personalised Health and Wellbeing Solutions. So I have a page about the veteran program on the website. So people are more than welcome to contact me either on my socials or via the website. Love to just have a conversation. There is,
Yeah.
there's no kind of there's no emphasis that you have to move forward or that I'm going to sell you anything. I'm certainly not into selling things for selling's sake. If people want to work with me, that's great. And as far as the veterinary program goes, that is part of our um, contribution to society. So it's a societal responsibility aspect of the business. There are no funds. Sorry, there's no cost to the veteran themselves. So yeah, reach out to me on the socials or via the website. Very happy to have a conversation.
Yeah. And I'd reiterate how powerful a conversation can be. Just
Absolutely.
even if it is just a conversation and it doesn't go any further,
Yeah.
it's great to have someone that will be able to relate and resonate with your journey and be able to share even, some just practical tips that they might be able to put in place, just like you have in today's episode. So thank
Awesome.
you, Michelle. And I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity to
My,
talk to your listeners again.
my pleasure. Thanks, Michelle.